Hello.
Welcome, Graham. Sunday evening, and
Hello.
another week, another death. I think this is turning into 2016 all over again.
Well, yeah, it's only going to get worse. I mean, the latest one's Tom Verlaine of television,
Yeah,
which I didn't see coming because technically 73 is one of the younger old musicians.
exactly. And but now, of course, as well, it's been described as after a short illness, and I think we were saying Jeff Beck after a short illness. So this is probably the reality is that if you live a rock and roll lifestyle, the chances are you're not going to have the longest innings you might otherwise have if you've played safe. But of course,
I
again,
don't know.
music.
It might be that, but we don't actually know the facts. We'd have to do
No,
a serious analysis of causes of death amongst 60s and 70s rock stars, which is a
exactly,
bit of a
exactly.
bit of a test.
I agree. But
But the
nevertheless,
interesting
we
thing,
are faced with
you know,
the loss of Jeff Beck, very distinctive guitarist, followed by another very, very distinctive guitarist in Tom Verlaine.
although he was totally different in style to Jeff Beck.
He absolutely was. Well, you could argue, Graham, he was different in style to any other guitarist. He was unique,
Well,
original.
he was unique, but he was rooted slightly in the Birds and Roger McGuinn's jingle jangle, slightly jazzy, meandering mid 60s guitar playing. Although he took it a hell lot further and he did do lots of different things. I had the great pleasure to see television live twice, and
Where did you
both
see them, Graham?
times I saw them at Manchester supporting Patti Smith about 16 years ago or something, and I saw them headlining at Leeds Irish Centre. And with the exception of Gang of Four, they were the best guitar band I've ever seen. I don't mean rock and roll or rock or indie or alternative. I mean the dynamics between the guitar players and the drums. They were the best guitar unit I've ever seen live on stage. They were like supernaturally brilliant at playing with each other. And Verlaine's lead guitar style was, so delicate but not weak at the same time. It was totally amazing to watch it live.
A little quiz question, Graham. Who was an early
Hmm.
member of the band? Who was a co-founder of the band that actually went
Richard
on to,
Hell.
yeah, Richard Hell, who went on to Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and
Hmm.
whose wearing of safety pins and other style accoutrements was spotted by Malcolm McLaren, who promptly brought it over to Britain and gave it to the Sex Pistols, and a whole look was launched over here for punk.
Yeah, well, there was a great synchronicity between New York and London when it came to punk, and they both borrowed off each other. It wasn't just a one
No,
way street across the
no.
Atlantic. It was both ways. But I think the interesting thing, apart from the fact about how good Verlaine was that as you and me both get Mojo magazine, which is like history today for music fans. In the
Yeah, yeah.
latest edition, which is a young man called Bob Dylan on the front,
Bob Dylan seems to be breaking through.
it's
Look
got
out for him.
five. Well, yeah, exactly, yeah. Up and coming. Well, they've got 5 pages of obituaries, 5 pages of obituaries in the latest Mojo. And it's getting to the point where at some point in the future, 2/3 of the magazine will be obituaries and 1/3 will be in musicians who are still alive. It's getting into a danger of being just like an obituary magazine.
It's interesting you spotted that. I thought as I flicked through it only yesterday, I thought exactly that. It was really noticeable. I mean, it is a
Mm.
reality. It is a reality, Graham, that musicians that we've loved since our youth are of an age where there is vulnerability, and it is a likelihood that this is just going to keep. This is, of course, I'm not being a radical in saying this. People, we are going to be getting more upset more regularly as we chalk up our own years at the great influences on us dying. That is unfortunately the way it can only go. But the consolation, there's no consolation for those who die, but the consolation for those who are still here is that maybe there'll be some now who actually will discover television who've never discovered them before. It's not that they've been an underground act, you could never ever say, but the very fact that they would be supporting uh, Patti Smith, or they would be playing the Leeds Irish Centre rather than playing at Leeds Arena would tell you to some extent that for all his importance, it didn't transfer into huge commercial success at any stage. They if you like, they were a band's bands, a critic's band, more than commercially hugely successful.
They had virtually no hits, full stop.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy to have a hit with a song like Marquee Moon being as long as it is. It's not easy that their first single, Little Johnny Jewel, even that was 7 minutes long, and they had to split it in the tradition of Don McLean's American Pie over two sides of a piece of plastic, right at the start of their career. So that you're right. I mean, that was never going to be part of their appeal. But would it be fair to say that if you were to do a list of the great debut albums, this debut album, Marquee Moon, would I think be amongst any music critic in their top 10?
Well, yeah, the album's so good that there's no way they could actually repeat it. And
No.
the second album, Adventure, is nowhere near as good because
No.
Marquee Moon is just flawless. And I remember it coming out in '77 when punk was really catching on, especially all the kids at school that were desperate into music. And Marquee Moon and Television were the only band that kids at school who'd previously liked Pink Floyd liked when punk came along. The kids who didn't really like the Pistols and the Clash and the Damned all loved Television and Marquee Moon because there was something very classicist about them. Although they were breaking new ground in some ways, they're also a classic, old-fashioned guitar band, really.
I hadn't recalled that within 3 months of Marquee Moon coming out, Television split for the first time, and Tom Verlaine made his first solo album after that. And they did reform, and actually, of course, they reformed again much later on. And after the final reforming, they never split up again and played festivals or support slots or whatever. So that, I mean, the fact that they split within 3 months of that album, that's quite something. That so all the critical acclaim that came their way in an end of year poll, they'd already split by then.
Yeah, well, it's like with bands and personalities and egos. And also, they'd been together for a good 5 years before that point came.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they just formed. So these things happen. And also, you got to remember that despite getting great reviews, they weren't selling lots of records, which means they weren't making much money. And if one thing's going to split a band up, it's lack of success. Because money's like a glue that keeps bands who don't get on together. So the Undertones, I remember watching them disintegrate, not because they didn't do great songs anymore. It's because the record sales were going down and down. And as soon as the record sales went down after their fourth album, they split up because, they were limping along, not able to have a decent lifestyle. So you can imagine that there was very little to keep Television together because they didn't make enough money.
No, exactly. One little detail I read in The Guardian today that I never knew, one of my favorite cult bands, Felt. Do you know why they got their name Felt? Why Lawrence chose that name?
Did he get his collar felt?
He didn't get his collar felt. He, in the song Venus, the way that Tom Verlaine sings the word felt, led Lawrence to choose the name Felt for the band. I never knew
Venus
that.
de Milo. You mean Venus de Milo of Marquee Moon? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the way the word felt is sung in that. I mean, Lawrence could always find the most obscure reasons for doing anything. New album, Mozart's Estate. Might look at that in a future edition of our podcast because he's one of the great cult musicians, I think. And this is his first album in a little while, which I've just bought a copy of today. So that might be one we can look at. So Tom Verlaine, farewell. Another blow in, as I say, a year that's beginning to look strangely like 2016 for far too many deaths, far too quickly, all going on at once.
Well, basically, the present's turning into the past in front of our eyes.
It is. And I'm aware that happens in our own lives as well, of course, Graham, but we cling on to that past in our present and celebrate it whenever we can. So, Graham, the big art story of the week would be the nominations for the Oscars. That is not to in any way belittle nominations for Golden Globes or to belittle nominations for the BAFTAs, but it is still the Oscars that we look to. And they've come out, and some of them are very predictable, some of them perhaps less so. What was your initial take on the Oscar nominations?
It was fairly predictable and it was fairly okay. I mean, they haven't nominated many bad films, but that's partly because because there's no mainstream films now that could possibly get in the Oscars, that they're forced to choose between big budget superhero films made of
Yeah.
CGI or more arty, interesting films that don't make lots of money. So
Yeah.
they're forced to go to that more arty side, which I think is a mistake in the long run because there'll be no audience for the Oscars eventually because they'll be rewarding films that virtually no one sees. But they are in a bit of a hole because Hollywood's not making this sort of middle of the road
No,
films that
it's
make a
not.
lot of money
It's not. No.
that they could put awards to. But I was quite surprised that Babylon wasn't there at all because even though I had a go at Babylon
Rightly
last
so,
week by
Graham.
the guy who
Rightly
played Lennon,
so.
yeah, but compared to the films that have been nominated, it's just as interesting as most of them.
Is
So I was
it?
quite surprised. But then again, I think the problem with Babylon, well, one of the problems with Babylon, there's a few problems with it, despite its good features as well. One of the big problems is the film starts with an elephant pooing over a man's face, and then about 3 minutes
that,
later, there's a semi-naked woman peeing over a fat man,
that
and
didn't
and
help,
those
did
are
it?
not things that the Oscars tend to recognize in the awards.
Those definitely didn't help. I mean,
Yeah,
predictably, the Fablemans film, Steven Spielberg gets
although it's not made
nominations.
much money, it's not been a big hit.
Well, it's only just come out over here, but I mean,
It's a big hit in America.
it's another of the hymns to cinema films that we've highlighted with Babylon and we've highlighted with Empire of Light. So it's the third this year already of films celebrating cinemas past, and which you could argue is little more than navel gazing, but Spielberg telling us a family story. His great strength is storytelling done with magic and sometimes with magic realism. So I mean, are you going to go and see that film? I certainly am.
Maybe I'm a bit worried it's going to be sentimental tribe because he has got a sentimental side, and when he keeps it in check and balances it out, I think he's absolutely brilliant. Like E.T. is simultaneously quite sort of dark and occasionally
Yes.
hard hitting, but also very sentimental. But when he's just sentimental, I find it hard to endure. So I'm slightly worried it'll just be sentimental, but he doesn't make bad films. None of his films are
No.
actually bad, so it's bound to be worth watching. But
I think
I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to work out who's going to win because Tar's been well represented with Kate Blanchett, but that's about a lesbian classical music conductor. So I don't
mm.
see how that can possibly win all the Oscars. Then you've got the Banshees of Ed Sheeran. I mean, sorry, Banshees of Inisherin, which is an Irish film based on a sort of psychodrama between two Irish peasants in a bleak landscape in the 1920s. I mean, I can't see how they can possibly give that all the big Oscars. So
Well,
I'm
they get
struggling to see who's going to win.
they are tipping the best actor Oscar is could well go to that film.
Well, yeah, but they can't give it best film or best. I'd be
I
gobsmacked.
can't see them giving best film.
Mm.
I agree with you, but Colin Farrell, a very strong contender for best actor.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm going to put forward the possibility of a film that is not gone out of the memory because that would obviously be defeatist to suggest. But the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was the
Mm.
adventure sci-fi film made by the two Daniels, Daniel
Mm.
Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. I think that stands quite a possibility
Mm.
because of its bravura of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So I think there's a possibility. That's the film that starred. Well, Michelle Yeoh was to the front of the film. Jamie Lee Curtis was in that film. James Hong was in that film. That's one of the more quirky ones. I think I'm right in saying that Top Gun has ended up getting some technical nominations, hasn't it?
Yeah, but this is the one way in which the Oscars are the same as the past. Top Gun would never win Oscars at the Oscars because the
No.
Oscars, although it likes to be mainstream, doesn't like to give awards to films it thinks are basically junk. And I thought Top Gun Maverick was actually better than junk. It was actually quite a good drama. So I think it should have got some serious Oscar nods. But the thing about the Oscars, they just won't recognize films that's beneath their dignity, and I think they still think that Top Gun is beneath their dignity.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just looking at here the list of Best Picture nominations. So it is up for Best Picture. Women Talking is up for Best Picture.
Mm.
I think I've got this right. Everything Everywhere All at Once is up for Best Picture. The Banshees of Ed Sheeran. Triangle of Sadness, which you have seen and I haven't seen.
It's very good, but it's filmed in sections. And the middle section is way better than the first section and the third section, and it
Which
sort
is
of highlights.
never what you
It
want in a
puts you up
film. Good start, good finish, middle less important. So it's the wrong way around.
exactamundo. It is a
All
good
Quiet on
film.
the Western Front, the German film.
Haven't seen it.
No,
I know the result though.
Yeah, but this is told from the Germans. Interestingly, it's currently on Netflix, but with English subtitles. Now, not with subtitles, but actually with so it's dubbed. So you're watching German, you're watching German soldiers, but they're speaking English in the version that's on Netflix, which is really disorientating. Completely, play it in the German with subtitles. Get the full flavour of the film.
Yeah,
Avatar, that's been nominated, Graham, for best film.
What has?
Avatar.
Oh dear.
And Tar, so Avatar and Tar. So Tar very much, two Tars. And then Elvis. Elvis.
Oh, Elvis.
Now that is an outside. Could you see that happening? It's really well directed. It's well directed, Graham.
Well, yeah, but it's so simplistic and so one tone and so over the top. And I mean, I don't criticize it when it's Laz Berman, but if you know nothing about Elvis, it's a great film.
So we're being undecided about this.
Well, if Top Gun Maverick is up for Best Picture, which I didn't actually know, in my stupidity, I'm gonna go for a long bet here, and I'm gonna say Best Picture, Top Gun.
I think that would be extraordinary if that happened.
Yeah, but it made loads of money. It almost single-handedly
good. Now that's the point, because actually, of course, it is the year's most successful film, and so on one level, actually, it's keeping cinemas open. Exactly. Today, Celestine and I went to see a documentary film whose name I'm now going to forget, but it's about the artist and activist Nan Goldin. It's been nominated for best documentary in the Oscars. So it was a 1:45 screening. How many people do you think were in the cinema at City Screen?
You two.
Plus two others who sat away from each other and then promptly started talking together after the film and looked like they were friends who just happened to stick to the seats that they'd been given, not realizing each other had booked. So only 4 people watching that film. It was in screen 3, so it wasn't in the big screen. But that's I mean, I think it's great that it's on, and actually they're showing it every single day this week. And I'm all for documentaries being shown, and it's a fascinating story that takes in this woman Nan Goldin taking on Sackler, which was the one of the big pharma companies, and whose pills, well, putting it bluntly, their pills arguably, because one has to avoid libel here, but exactly, but nevertheless, if we say that there have been deaths from overdoses and deaths from addictions in America through pills, and I'm not associating it with this company, but nevertheless, Sackler have been removed from a whole series of museums and galleries now from sponsoring them, which is very significant. And this is what Nan Goldin has brought about with a group called PAIN, PAIN acronym. And it's an absolutely fascinating and well worth seeing film. And it is in the nominations for Best Documentary. And I think it's important that City Screen shows a film like that. I always bang on about diversity there, so I'm really happy that it's showing there. So okay, you're going for Top Gun to win. I'm I'm going to surprise myself because I haven't seen Fabelmans, although it has just opened. I think Fabelmans could win if Hollywood decides to champion Hollywood and what it's all about. Just occasionally going for a really big superstar of Hollywood is something that the Oscars is known to do. So maybe that could happen, but we shall see. So Graham, that's one of our thoughts this week. Now, I have been playing the Bell and Sebastian album consistently, and you may have seen that the health of Stuart Murdoch is such that his health took a turn for the worse in November, so they've cancelled all the American tour dates this year
Yeah.
that they were due to play. But nevertheless, this album has gone ahead, and you feel the need to maybe offer a little bit of an apology to Bell
Well,
and
yeah,
Sebastian.
I've been playing it a lot, and I was probably a bit harsh last week. It is a good album, Late Developers, and in some
It's a
ways
bit
it's
of a
better
late
than the
developer in its own right, Graham, you could say, given your
yeah, and in
reaction
some
to
ways it's better than the previous album, bit of previous.
it.
I think I'm being harsh because I rate them highly, and I think if they'd taken the two best tracks from a bit of previous, Sea of Sorrow and Working Boy New York City, and plonked it on Late Developers, it would have been a great album.
Mm.
But they
They,
didn't.
I was reading up about it, and they did actually decide that the tracks that they'd chosen for a bit of previous was supposed
Hmm.
to be the ones that they thought the record company would most like.
Oh
So
yeah,
they felt that, yes, so they felt they'd top loaded the songs on
yeah,
to the first of the albums, but then thought, well, actually, we've got so many good other songs. Subsequently, second album comes along.
hmm.
I rather am with you on the fact that I think there's as many good songs and arguably more good songs actually on Late Developers. That in fact, I think out of the two records, it entirely lives up to its title. It is a late developer and it has more strength, arguably, than a bit of previous. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that their own judgments as to what would appeal to a record company as opposed to what would appeal maybe to the fans. So they answered initially to the record company's call rather than their own instincts.
Yeah, well, there's a really great track on Late Developers that I really like. A sort of acoustic-y, slightly 70s Cat Stevens number called
Yes,
"Will I Tell You a Secret?" And that's just absolutely lovely. It's a really great
it
little
is.
track.
It is. I agree. I agree. So I think it's a very justified apology to Bell and Sebastian. And
Mm.
I think
And
the
just keep your
reason
job.
maybe one makes the assessments that we do is that we judge them by the very, very highest standards because they've been remarkably consistent. And if we find it as where the hell can they go next? The only thing I think to say on that is just keep making the levels of melodious songwriting that they've always done. Just keep that. I think experimentalism is only ever going to be small shifts really within that band. But so many bands don't end up writing great songs later in their careers. This band consistently writes at a level that justifies them still being around. So there's the apology,
Certainly
and
do. They've not become tired.
absolutely not. No,
They've got virtually no new musical avenues to go down, but
no,
their standards haven't really dropped.
exactly. Now we've highlighted, Graham, that in 2022 there was a heap of music books that came out, and we've highlighted a series of them. But actually, there's two here that we haven't highlighted before, which again have been, well, certainly in the case of Jarvis Cocker's Good Pop, Bad Pop, has had glowing reviews. The other book I don't know at all. John Stewart's Dylan, Lennon, Marx, and God. Not a book that I'm familiar with. Tell me how you came across it, Graham, and what the history is behind that, and then we'll look at Jarvis's one as well. So tell me about John Stewart. Who is he, and what's his book
Well,
drawn out
he's
for you?
he's a cultural academic,
Right.
but he's also the former guitar player in Sleeper, and he's also the current guitar player in The Wedding Present. So he's a musician and academic. And I came
Ah,
across
okay.
the book
Right.
when I famously met Wei, the Chinese artist, for
In
about
your
two
brief,
minutes
in your brief,
in
no way,
Cambridge
Wei,
last
meeting with
year, yeah,
Wei.
last year, yeah. I popped at the Cambridge University bookshop, which
Yeah.
it says it's the oldest bookshop in the world, but it's only because it's in a lineage. It's not actually the original bookshop. But anyway,
Mm.
it turns out the Cambridge University bookshop has loads of books that Cambridge University Press prints. Who would have thought it? Which
Yeah.
you can't really get anywhere else. And I was like, it was like a treasure trove of like books about music history that I'd never seen
Ah.
before. One of them was Dylan, Lennon, Marx, and God, and I thought, how can you not buy a book called
Yes.
Dylan,
The
Lennon,
title,
Marx?
the title alone, fantastic. Yes.
So, I've read the whole of that book, and that took me about a month, maybe two
So,
months, because it's
Graham, when was it
very
written?
academic. But what's that?
When was it written?
They both came out. Both books came out in 2022
So
on
this
hardback.
was a book from last year, right? Okay, but I
Oh
mean,
yeah, they're both new books.
I've not seen that book in any bookshop
Exactly.
around here at all.
Exactly, but in style, it's so different to Jarvis's. When I
Yeah,
got Jarvis Booker's Good Pop, Bad Pop, which is on Jonathan Cape, or Penguin Random House, which is probably owned by Sony or
yeah,
Universal or
yeah.
Asda's or Facebook, because they're all owned by one gigantic worldwide company, obviously. Well, when I
Yeah.
when I got Jarvis's book for Christmas, I've read the book is so easy to read in
Mm.
comparison to Lennon, Marx and God. I read the whole thing in a week and a half.
Yeah.
It probably only took me about 4 hours to read the whole book, possibly less. It's completely different to Lennon, Marx and God in every way. It could be different.
If my recollection's right, it's a series of items that Jarvis owns that is written about. Have I got that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. One reviewer said it was like a history of Jarvis and 100 objects,
Yeah.
but it isn't really. I mean, what he says is that he's come across all these objects while clearing out his loft, which go back all the
I
way back
remember
to his
now.
childhood
Yes.
days in Sheffield. But if you think about it, he's lived in Paris, he's lived in London, he's lived here and there. Unless he went up to his loft and emptied it every time and transported it to the next place, how can this actually be? So I think this is a conceit. I think they tried to work out, him and
Mm.
the editor and the publishers, how to approach this book to make it different. And the design is absolutely sensational. I mean, even if you weren't interested in Jarvis Cocker, you could just buy the book to look at the design. It's like a cross between a pop art book and a Blue Peter Annual from 1972. It's just superbly
Mm.
illustrated and laid out. But I think also they've done this for another reason, which isn't quite so good. It's a really lightweight book. It's not really a great piece of writing. And for a man who writes superb lyrics, his writing of his own life story is fairly prosaic. It's not, when you read Bob Dylan's Chronicles or even Morrissey's autobiography, you
Yeah.
think, wow, these guys can actually write
Or
really good.
Elvis Costello's.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Jarvis is just like his usual laconic, downplaying, understated, meandering, very likable, charming self.
Mm.
So as an audiobook, it would be fantastic. But as something to read, I mean, when he's talking about his childhood days, it's got less edge than Just William. And once he gets to the early years of pulp and the trials and tribulations of trying to get a tiny indie band in Sheffield to be successful,
Yeah.
and it ends in 1988, well before they've achieved anything much. When he gets to that part, it reads like one of those really light-hearted, shallow stand-up comedians' memoirs of their early years. You know, when you get a book by a modern-day comedian, and it's not really non-fiction; it's more like them standing up and telling a story. It's a bit like that. And so it's like enjoyable and easy to read, but it's a bit insubstantial, which I was quite surprised about.
I mean, I think there is a risk of that, though, Graham, when one focuses on a series of objects. The chances of depth are not great by comparison with now. Then is Warren, I think, isn't it? In Nick Cave's band, you can remember it, Warren
That's right,
Ellis,
Warren Ellis, yeah, yeah.
and he's written about. Do you remember what he's written about?
It was about chewing gum that Nina Simone had left at a gig
Right.
when he saw
So
it.
he
Yeah.
writes or constructs an entire book on
Mm,
that basis, on a piece of
yeah.
chewing gum she left underneath the piano that Warren Ellis then went and collected. And of course, I think it's now ended up, hasn't it, been going to a museum, I think. So the journey of one piece. So written in a lot more depth than Jarvis, who I think the very nature, if you pick 100 objects, you're running a risk of not having that much depth to them. It does
No,
end
no,
up
you're
as
right.
a list book. You know, we can think of many a list book. You know, the a history of biscuits in 100 biscuits, whatever. There is that sense, I think, that you're going to risk a certain level of shallowness, and
It'd
that
be
it's a
like
lighter.
writing a book. It'd be like writing a book about Leeds United's history
Yeah,
as 100 football boots
yeah.
and describing the different football boots and what they were like and who'd worn them. It's that sort of thing, really.
I
But
would predict. Do you not
mm,
think that Jarvis ultimately will end up writing about the great years of pulp?
he will do, but I'm a bit worried about how he'll do it. I think that Jarvis, thinking about his actual songwriting and his lyrics, I do think Jarvis wants to write a long form non-fiction piece.
Mm,
I don't think it suits his personality. I think he likes to do a combination of pithiness, but with
yeah.
meandering, natural tangent. And natural tangent meandering, with a little bit of pithiness, doesn't lead to great non-fiction. So obviously, I could be entirely wrong, but I don't think he's got it in him. And I think he knows that as well because on page 355 of a book which is only 357 pages long, so 2 pages for the end, Jarvis actually says this: the other way I warded off the bad pop was by writing songs. I haven't gone into too much detail in this book about specific songs I have written. That would be violating the terms of the Magic Circle that Leonard Cohen referred to during our interview in 2012. Because Leonard Cohen refused to discuss how he writes songs. He says that'll just break the magic. So
same
basically,
with Van
Jarvis
Morrison.
admits, Jarvis admits at the end of the book that he hasn't given you any detail about his songs. Well, what's the point of writing the book? Because the one thing you want to know is the detail about writing the songs.
So that's a bit of a Jarvis cock up then, Graham. Yeah.
Well, no, it's just his style and it's the way he does it. And you either like it or you don't like it. But the thing about Dylan, Lennon, Marx, and God is you actually learn things. And you do learn some things in Jarvis's book, but you learn a hell lot more in Dylan, Lennon, Marx, and God because the guys thought about things really deeply and analysed things and compared things, just like he was a professor of pop. And you end up knowing things you didn't know before and seeing things a different way. So I prefer that, quite frankly.
That's what we're going with.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.